shadows emerge.
Since I read the Chronicle of Loner about this mysterious place our Ubersreich 4, or 5, it doesn't matter, since I read that, a question was looming over my head. This place in the Chaos Wastes, the Citadel of Eternity, where have I heard that name before? Took me a few days to collect my thoughts on that. Nothing dramatic really, but at some point as I was talking about a childhood game of mine called Warhammer Online, Age of Reckoning, it clicked. Now some might know what place I'm talking about already, but I would assume most have never heard of it. I'm also not entirely sure how canon this beautiful MMO is, which, by the way, still playable on a private server, under the name Return of Reckoning. I can only recommend it. However, I do know for a fact that the location the Citadel might be at is canon. Now you might think, well, duh, it's in the Chaos Wastes, you dumb bitch. That is not what I meant though. The Citadel is located within a place within the Chaos Wastes. The Inevitable City. Now, what exactly is the Inevitable City? To quote a quick excerpt from the Fantasy Wiki, a link to the article in the description. Built of dark madness and inspired by insane architects, the Inevitable City sits at the nexus of several lonely forgotten roads that can be found crisscrossing through the Chaos Wastes. Many stories and tales surround the city. It is said to lure and forever trap unfortunate travelers who stumble into the roads leading to it. In other accounts, it is unreachable, always on the horizon, no matter how far the traveler walks towards or away from it. It is also said to be able to rebuild itself if a single stone is left after it is razed. The Inevitable City is a symbol of all that is lost and the plight of those that find themselves in desperate situations with no way out. Its illusions and mazes have a way of returning a traveler back to the same location, regardless of what route he takes. Scholars believe the Inevitable City is a living metaphor for the downward spiral that the lure of chaos represents, for once you walk down the dark path, there's no hope of return. End quote. Now how does that tell us that the Inevitable City is still canon? This lore could be old, couldn't it? Well, it is as recent as it can be. During the end times in which we currently are, Vardek Krom, a herald of the Ever-Chosen, was stationed at the city. Now earlier I mentioned an old game of which I am unsure if it is still or ever was canon, but for the sake of fun speculation, and because this theory is based upon the hypothesis that the Citadel of Eternity might also be known under a different name, let's assume so. What does that mean? Well, my theory is that the Citadel of Eternity is a place within the Inevitable City, of which we do know that it is canon. But what exactly is the inevitable city, and what does that have to do with an old video game? Let us go back in time a little, to the Age of Reckoning.
War is everywhere. The dwarves fight a desperate battle against the savage greenskins. The Empire is under siege by the marauding armies of chaos. And across the great ocean, the Dark Elves assault Ulthuan, the island home of the High Elves. Faced with certain doom, elves, men, and dwarves have united their forces to form an alliance of order.
Within the center of the inevitable city rules a champion of Tzeentch, far before the end times, though during the reign of Karl Franz. Charsanek, gifted with mutational magic by his dark god, clad in armor made to fit his twisted form, attempts to conquer the old world in the name of the Raven God. But he is not alone within these twisted streets and corridors. Within the city itself one can find dark and empty streets, but it is alive in more than one way. Demons of all four of the Chaos Gods can be encountered here, as well as the souls of those damned and plighted that wandered to this place and never found a way to escape it. Mutants cackle at the delight they experience while observing those wandering the desolate roads and halls of this eldritch structure, while eyes seem to glare at them from every corner and wall. Those that wander far into the Cyclopean city will find a place, an enormous crater shining bright in the eerie light of an indescribably large rift. Could this be the rift created during the Great Calamity, when the polar warp gates were destroyed? The almost endless crater surrounded by the jagged city walls, could those be the remnants of that gate? Or were those built by the Old Ones in a desperate and failed attempt to stem the tide of chaos surging into the world? And the city itself, has it been a place of the Old Ones themselves? Twisted by the sudden flood of mutating energies, its inhabitants left to a fate more cruel than death could ever be. Their friends and families left to eternally wonder what nightmarish events took place in the now darkened and empty streets and corners and homes of this hell. An echo of what it might have been before, but now ravaged by unknowable nightmares and screams that echo from the deepest shadows of the darkest alleyways, seemingly without a source, but dreadful nonetheless. Pure warp essence seeps and bleeds from this rift into reality, and in front of this magnificent sight, the silhouette of a singular, tall structure lies. During the Age of Reckoning, it clearly bore the markings of Tzeentch and entailed the throne room of Charsanek. As it is with all things chaos, dedication to a ruinous power and visual representation often go hand in hand. The eternal citadel, floating above an endless abyss, conquered by the latest plaything of a dark god and molded to represent its new master. It is connected to the rest of the city with broken bridges and chains, surrounded by floating rocks, almost as if the city itself is being consumed by the rift. As it should be. Or else, such a fate would one day befall the entirety of the old world, no longer contained within a place where the servants of all the dark gods seek to exert their control and shape their reality to better fit their thirsting masters. The picture might start to get a little clearer now, but just in case my musings and ramblings were too cryptic, I shall spell it out. The Citadel of Eternity is also known as the Eternal Citadel, the nexus of the inevitable city where the walls between reality are the thinnest and nightmares made manifest spill into reality to set forth to conquer and to dominate. Why would we ever go to a place like this, where the forces of chaos are so strong and concentrated, a mere mortal would have no chance of defending himself against all the knowable and the unknowable that might assail their minds and bodies? To quote from the wiki again, the Chaos Wastes is the fourth zone for the Raven host. The outskirts of the Chaos Wastes are similar to an Arctic tundra, while further inward they become a warped wasteland, full of mutated inhabitants and changed by the powers of chaos, even to the point of time slowing down or speeding up, and the laws of gravity failing, sending chunks of earth into the sky. The Chaos Wastes are inhabited by various horrific and mutated flora and fauna. Demons, many beastmen, and the barbaric tribes of Northmen who worship the Chaos Gods, whose influence is strong here. Several other lesser rifts also exist in the wastes, notably those beyond the Bastion Stairs and at the center of the crater which the inevitable city is built upon. End quote. Well, the last part seems to drive a wench into my theory of that rift being the rift from the Great Calamity, but still a nice idea. I think I might use that for a Warhammer RPG campaign. Though I think if we ever reach the inevitable city and the Citadel is at its heart, we will also see the Cold Mires, a place of worship for those dedicated to Nurgle, and speculated to be reverenced by Bodvar Ripspreader with his signature line, "For Mire!" And it is not too unusual to encounter both the slaves to darkness as well as beastmen. We already have a roster of existing enemies Fetcher could throw at us. We fight our way through the Cold Mire to find information about the Citadel's whereabouts. From there on out, we discover the lost roads that lead to the city and find it in a desolate but occupied state. The Rotbloods have conquered it, and at the center we find the Citadel ruled over by their champion. We destroy him. The city, no longer under the control of Nurgle, falls back into a civil war, if you will, and during the end times is then used as a stronghold for Crom. However, there's one last thing to mention. A very notable curiosity about the Chaos Wastes. Those that seek to become a champion of the Dark Gods travel to the farthest north to give themselves over to the judgment of their Dark Gods, because the walls between reality and these rifts are either extremely thin, or, in the case of the Polar Warp Gates, gone for good. And let us not forget that the term Realm of Chaos is a mortal term. Within the warp exist all the other gods as well, and the winds of magic spew forth into the world. If one would seek to commune with a god, what better place than the tallest spire of the Eternal Citadel, right underneath one of those dreadful rifts? Well, let's see where we will end up. Thanks for watching.
My child, there is so much to tell you, that I have run out of time. The sacrifice I made was not enough. The Dark Gods still feed on our transgressions.